Hello, friends. It's Katie back with another episode of my vlog and, of course, another Cinema Club Sunday Roundup. And today, you guys, I am so excited because for the first time in almost a year and a half, we got to go see a movie in the theater yesterday. Oh, it was amazing. We got to go to the Hollywood Theater here in Portland, which is probably the most amazing theater in town. And we got to see one of my all-time favorite films, 2001: A Space Odyssey, presented in 70 millimeter. It was a religious experience is probably the best way I could describe this. 2001 is an incredible film. Being able to see it in the theater is incredible. Being able to see it in the theater on 70 millimeter is unbelievable. And then with the dry spell of the pandemic lockdown in front of all that, it felt incredible. It was so totally amazing to be able to go to the movies and see such an incredible piece. So I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what else to say here, but it was fantastic. If you have been just dying over not being able to go to movies for the last year and almost a half or whatever it's been, and movie theaters have opened back up near you, I encourage you, go see a movie. It felt, well, you can see I am becoming overwhelmed with emotion and not able to quite speak about it correctly, but yeah. Whew. Go and see a movie in the theater after all this time. Absolutely amazing feeling. And again, 2001, what a film. So let's talk about this film for a second. 1968, directed by Stanley Kubrick, written by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke. It is probably the greatest science fiction movie ever made in the history of cinema, as far as I'm concerned. Plot-wise, maybe not so much. But in terms of the feast for the eyes that Kubrick creates here, there's no comparison as far as I'm concerned. The story begins, of course, with the dawn of man in prehistoric times. We have a group of proto-humans who encounter the black monolith, which gives them the idea to use tools, and one of these creatures picks up a bone and starts using it as a club. And then we transition from that kind of prologue of the story through one of the most famous match cuts in history to the space ballet part, where we are now in the future, which is, of course, our past, but from a 1968 perspective, 2001 is the future. And we are in Earth orbit watching a Pan Am rocket from planet Earth taking people up to a rotating space station. And then we have some scenes on the space station. And then we travel from the space station to the moon, where another black monolith has been found. And when the one on the moon gets hit with sunlight, it emits a radio signal pointed at Jupiter. And then we fast forward very quickly. 18 months later, we're on the Jupiter mission on board the spaceship Discovery, which of course has the famous computer HAL 9000 controlling it. And we are on a journey out to Jupiter to find out what was the source of this radio transmission. And we get to slowly go along to Jupiter, experiencing the amazing technical marvels of the Discovery spaceship on the way. And of course, the crew gets into some conflict with the computer that is controlling the ship. I won't say more than that, even though this film is over 50 years old. You guys know I don't like to say spoilers. So if for some reason you have not seen 2001 and you don't know how it ends, I'm not going to say how it ends. I will say that it is a bit confusing. If you've never seen it, you might want to read a plot synopsis before you go in. I definitely recommend reading the book written by Arthur C. Clarke. The book and the movie script were written kind of right alongside of each other, and the book actually came out after the movie, but it does quite a bit of explaining that the movie doesn't do. The movie, like I said, it's basically just a visual treat, and audio in terms of the music, but it's not a dialogue-driven film. It's not a plot-driven film at all. It really is a experiential film, if you will. And it's full of so many totally famous, totally groundbreaking scenes and, of course, special effects. One of the most amazing things about this film is everything is practical effects and everything is done in camera. And it all looks incredible and it has held up incredibly well over 50 plus years of cinema history. There are only a couple of parts where it gets a little, I don't even want to say cheesy, but there's a space baby part where that guy looks a little cheesy. And there's the Stargate sequence, or, space trippin', if you will, which feels like it goes on and on and on for a really long time, which I think is an intended effect because the idea is that as you're traveling, across vast distances of space, your experience of reality become all distorted. So I actually looked it up, and the Stargate sequence is only 5 minutes long, but while you're watching the movie, it feels like it's like 10 or 15 minutes long, and you're like, wow, this is like going on for a long time. But those are my only two criticisms of this entire almost 3 hour long amazing masterpiece of a film. I don't know what more to say other than 10 out of 10, totally required viewing, one of the greatest films ever made, possibly, like I said, the greatest science fiction film ever made. And I'm a huge Kubrick fan. So, I really don't like when people ask, what's your favorite movie? I say, can I name off some favorite directors instead of favorite movies? And Stanley Kubrick is always at or near the top of my list for favorite directors. And when people press me, I usually will actually say Dr. Strangelove is my favorite film of his. And that's actually the one that he made right before 2001. They're very, very different from each other. And I think if you watch both of them, it gives you a pretty cool take on like Kubrick's range in terms of what he can do as a director at the helm of one of these things. So 2001: A Space Odyssey, like I said, 10 out of 10 required viewing. If you've never seen it, I highly recommend trying to see it on a big ass screen if you can, but these showings are few and far between. So if you live in the type of city that has a theater with a 70mm projector, and maybe they run 2001 like once a year or once every 2 years or whatever, do yourself a favor and go see it. If you can't see it on a big screen, watch it on a smaller screen. Just try to maybe stick your face really close to the smaller screen, but definitely watch it with no distractions. This is not I'm working on a project or I'm scrolling my phone or whatever type of movie. I think all movies should be viewed without distractions, but I'll admit I do knit when we watch movies at home sometimes. This is definitely not a knitting movie. This is oh my God, I can't believe what I'm seeing. My eyes are just locked on the screen the whole time kind of movie. So, hopefully, if any of you out there have never seen 2001 before, I've encouraged you to take a look at that film because amazing. And again, if you watch it for the first time and you're like, what was that ending? I don't understand what happened here. Look up some analysis online, or again, better yet, read the book. I really feel like if you watch this film and then read the book right after you've watched the film, it's like a perfect package there. So 2001: A Space Odyssey, highly recommended, required viewing around here. Now, on a totally different note, this last week contained the date July 14th. And as you guys know, we like to watch a movie that takes place on a day, if we can. And someone reminded me that July 14th is Con Air Day. And I turned to Sean and I said, can we watch Con Air tonight? And it turned out that he had never seen Con Air, which I couldn't believe. So we watched it on July 14th. Yes, the movie takes place in one day, basically. There's a little prologue part, but all of the action of the movie takes place in a single day. And that day is July 14th. And the fact that it's July 14th is brought up over and over again in the film. So we felt like it was a perfect day to watch Con Air, and we had a ton of fun watching it. This is the film, of course, from 1997, directed by Simon West, starring Nicolas Cage, John Malkovich, John Cusack, who the kids called Budget Keanu Reeves, which was pretty funny. Gosh, who else is in this? There's a lot of really great actors playing really grody convicts who are being transported on an airplane. You've got Ving Rhames is in it, Danny Trejo is in it, Steve Buscemi as like a total creepazoid character. Dave Chappelle shows up in it. He's hilarious, of course. And the basic plot is that our hero, played by Nicolas Cage, is a army ranger who accidentally killed a guy in like a bar brawl. And he's been in jail serving, his sentence for killing this guy. And he's finally getting out, and he's supposed to fly home on this prisoner transport airplane. But of course, nothing could be that straightforward. And so what happens instead is the other convicts on the prisoner transport airplane have a whole plan that they put in motion to hijack the airplane and go somewhere else with it. So then Nicolas Cage has to stop them because, of course, he's the good guy on the airplane. And he's working with John Cusack, who's not on the airplane, but is playing a U.S. Marshal who's trying to recover the missing airplane. It's dumb. It's big budget action. It's like a Jerry Bruckheimer produced thing, full of tons of explosions and crazy, action sequences that are just awesome. There's some computer assisted effects, but it looks like mostly practical. It looks like they added a bunch of fire with computers, which becomes very obvious when you're looking at the thing. But it's not that bad as far as like, computer effects go. But this is a really fun movie. It's a fun ride. Everyone does a great job in their roles. I would say Nicolas Cage's accent work, no thank you. And the terrible, like the main theme song, it's like How Do I Live Without You? But other than those two things, it's a pretty solid, stupid action movie. Again, I'm not like recommending this movie because it's like super thoughtful or going to make you, realize a bunch of stuff about yourself or life or the world. But it's a totally fun ride. And the ending sequence, I'm not going to say what area of America gets pretty well destroyed, but it's very satisfying when it happens. So yeah, Con Air, totally fun. And then after we watched that one, I realized that the absolutely perfect follow-up to Con Air, again, starring John Malkovich and John Cusack, is Being John Malkovich, also starring John Malkovich and John Cusack. So we watched that one the next night, and we don't usually do double bills around here. We just watch one film at a time. But I honestly think that a Con Air Being John Malkovich double bill where you actually watch them back to back might be just perfect. We had a ton of fun watching them one day after the other, and I think if you just smacked them together, it would be fantastic. Being John Malkovich, if you guys haven't heard of that one, is the 1999 dark fantasy comedy directed by Spike Jonze and written by Charlie Kaufman. Again, starring John Cusack. He's like an unemployed puppeteer who he gets a job working in this office that's on the 7.5 floor of a building. So they have to like jam the elevator between the 7th and 8th floors and force the door open. And then everyone's walking around like stooped over because it's like a half floor in a building. And that's just kind of the beginning of the absurdity that winds up happening in this movie. But so John Cusack's character gets a job working at this bizarre office space. And one day when he's filing things, he drops something behind a cabinet and he has to move the cabinet, and he finds a tiny door. And he goes through the door, and it turns out that it's a portal into John Malkovich's mind. So you can imagine the types of places that you can go with this as kind of the seed of your story. Okay, we've got an office that has a door that's a portal into John Malkovich's mind. Now, when you go through the portal, you only get to stay inside John Malkovich's mind. And of course, you're seeing things from Malkovich's point of view when you're in his mind. It only lets you stay in there for about 15 minutes, and then you get kicked out and you wind up falling out of the sky and landing by the side of the road next to the New Jersey Turnpike. So as you can imagine, things get a little out of hand once Cusack's character discovers this, and he and another character in the movie, whose name is Maxine, played really, really wonderfully by Catherine Keener, decide to create a side business, basically selling tickets to go on this ride to go into John Malkovich's mind. Meanwhile, John Cusack's wife in the film, played by Cameron Diaz, who's barely recognizable. They've done her up to look really homely and not glamorous at all. And she's like obsessed with animals and has a whole apartment full of pets. She falls in love with Catherine Keener's character, but they only want to like get together if Cameron Diaz's character is currently inhabiting John Malkovich's mind. So that's a very convoluted part of the story. And then, of course, at some point in the film, Malkovich himself figures out what's going on, shows up at the place with the portal, and goes into his own mind portal, which I'm not going to say anything about what he finds when he goes through the portal into his own mind, but it's maybe my favorite part of the whole movie. It's very unexpected, and I think totally accurate to what would happen if this was a real thing that you could actually do. This movie is funny. It's funny in really unexpected ways. It's very smart. Really, really good acting from all of the actors. Really well written, really well directed. Fantastic film. I saw it when it came out in the theater back in 1999, and I have not watched it since. Watched it a few days ago, and it was just perfect. It held up so incredibly well. Stood right up to my own memory of it. It was just fantastic. So definitely recommending that one if you guys have never seen it, and you like especially like weird dark fantasy comedy stuff. But again, if you're willing to take this crazy ride with me, do the Con Air being John Malkovich double bill. I don't think that you'll regret it. It's really fun to watch these actors kind of exhibiting a totally crazy range of stuff across these two movies. So. And then the other movies that we watched this week were both directed by one of our favorites around here, Hayao Miyazaki. I am sad to report that it turns out that my Disney Plus subscription does not get me access to the Studio Ghibli films, which is totally disappointing and doesn't make sense to me, but okay. We went ahead and paid our few dollars or whatever to rent a copy of My Neighbor Totoro. This time we watched it in the original Japanese dialogue with English subtitles, which was fantastic. I was going to say grew up, but by the time I first saw My Neighbor Totoro, I was an older teenager. So, I mean, I guess I still had some growing up to do. But first couple times I saw My Neighbor Totoro was the other English dub, not the Disney one, but the one that was released in the 90s. And so that was the one I was the most familiar with. And then when Disney redid the dub in the mid 2000s, that's the one we started watching because that's the one that's widely available. So that's the audio track that I'm pretty much used to at this point, with the English language version of the theme song and all of that. So it was really cool to watch this film that I've seen, I don't even know how many times, but actually watch it in the original Japanese, which is something we've never done with Totoro for some reason. It was fantastic. Everyone was great, but particularly the actors who played the dad, Mr. Kusakabe, and Granny, the next door neighbor lady, were both phenomenal. I loved their performances. And it was so cool to get to hear them instead of, these English dub versions. It was also funny for me because I know the song in English really, really well, but I was like, whoa, here it is in Japanese. So what to say about My Neighbor Totoro? It's basically a perfect movie. In fact, I would say 2001 and My Neighbor Totoro are both about as close to perfect movies as movies can get in totally different ways. I often, when people ask what's my favorite animated movie, I will give like some current favorites and sort of a handful, and I'll usually say, but I'm not like counting Totoro when I make this list, because Totoro is like in a league of its own. It's just sort of off to the side where it can't really be compared to anything else because it's just so cool by itself, the way it is, right? I'm assuming that everybody watching this has seen My Neighbor Totoro, but if you have not, oh my God, please see this film. It is incredible. Um, Very brief plot summary. We have a professor and his two daughters, Satsuki and May, who've moved to a new house in the countryside so they can be closer to the hospital where the mom of the family is staying. She has some kind of illness that's keeping her in the hospital for an extended stay. So the dad and the daughters move house to be closer to the hospital where she's staying. He's very distracted by the sick wife in the hospital, plus he's, got his job at the university. And so the girls, the two daughters, are left not totally on their own, but in a very independent situation where they can get into not trouble, but adventures. And the younger daughter, whose name is May, winds up following some little Totoro creatures. They look kind of like cartoon bunnies, but not really, through the forest and into the inside of this humongous camphor tree on their property, where she meets the big Totoro, who's really, really big. And she befriends him and wants to stay and hang out with him forever. She falls asleep on him in this really sweet scene, but then when she wakes up, he's nowhere to be seen, and her dad and older sister Satsuki are like, "Yo, May, what have you been doing?" And she tells them all about meeting Totoro, but now she can't find the way back into his tree anymore. And her dad tells her that since he's a magical creature, she's sure to see him again, like when he wants to reveal himself, but it's not going to happen right now. And so then the rest of the film is May and Satsuki interfacing with Totoro and his two little Totoros, and getting to sort of become witness to their magical world of plants and nature, which is just so sweet and pure-hearted and wonderful as a plot. Or I guess as a situation. It doesn't actually have much plot. I would say that's what's in common with Totoro and 2001, but so besides both being great, is they're not that plot driven. In Totoro, it's way more about the scenario, the relationships, and just how everyone is interfacing together than rather being driven by a specific plot itself. Later in the movie, we get to meet the cat bus, who is maybe my favorite character in the movie. And Totoro and Cat Bus wind up helping out May and Satsuki when they need it most. We'll just leave it there. If you've never seen My Neighbor Totoro, extremely, extremely encouraged to do so. Again, 10 out of 10, required viewing, one of the most touching and heartwarming films I think I've ever seen. And lastly, another Hayao Miyazaki movie we watched this week was The Castle of Cagliostro from 1979. Actually, Miyazaki's first film that he ever directed, based on a pre-existing manga series by Monkey Punch, which had been published in the 60s, I think, in Japan. It's about the adventures of the gentleman thief Lupin and his kind of team of cohorts, who are all colorful characters in their own right. You have Jigen, Goemon, and Fujiko, who are his teammates, and then Inspector Zenigata, who's kind of his foil usually in the manga series and the TV series, but they kind of team up in Castle of Cagliostro to stop a forced marriage and take down a counterfeiter. Again, I don't want to give away too much. This one's got a very interesting plot, definitely plot driven. The really cool thing for me, though, about Lupin is the stylization, the way it's animated, the way the characters move around on the screen and do the things that they do. The characterizations are great. And that, for me, is the real magic of this one. So if you are a Ghibli fan, a Miyazaki fan, and you've never heard or seen Castle of Cagliostro, I would definitely, definitely recommend that one for any Miyazaki fan. I will say that Miyazaki's portrayal of Lupin and the other associated characters is way more like happy-go-lucky, and the original it's way more like he's like scheming and lecherous. So Monkey Punch, the guy who made the manga, liked the movie of Castle Cagliostro, but he definitely was like, Miyazaki kind of took that in a different direction than I would have. So take that with a grain of salt there. If you watch Cagliostro and you're like, wow, I love Lupin, and you're like, I'm gonna go check out the TV series and the original manga, it's definitely grittier and nastier than the Miyazaki version, but maybe you like that. All right, you guys, I went way over my 20-minute time here, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. I will be back in a few more days with another episode of my vlog. As usual, please leave me comments down below letting me know what you've been watching recently or if you have a recommendation for us. And like I said, I'll be back in a few more days. So until then, stay safe and take care out there.